Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. And as usual, I have to pop up my volume here. Hang on a sec. Whoops. Not that. You would think the volume settings would be constant, but they're not. Every time you reboot the computer, they go back to a certain level. There we go. And it's not that I'm always rebooting my computers, but I get micro power outages up here, and it shuts the electronics down. I have all these breaker boxes and surge protection boxes. You have to have these things with the electrical system in Central America. I learned this the hard way, by the way. I lost I think 4 Lenovo ThinkPads in the first 3 years I was here. Just fried them. Tonight I have a humdinger of a show, and this is not an off the top of my head show. I've actually worked this one out. It started to come in the morning, and I've been kind of working on it on and off all day. So let's just get into it. Now I'm going to start with a clip from Redacted, a clip of a clip. It was a 22-minute segment, and I just cut down the first 5 minutes. And let's watch that now, because this is going to be a long one, and I got to be efficient with my time.
All right, I want to talk about time travel. I'm looking forward to this all day. I've been looking forward to talking with Ashton Forbes all day in the secret technology. Yes, the White House admitting this week, on the record, by the way, that we possess the technology to manipulate time and space. In other words, time travel, teleportation technology, like the very same technology that was used to make MH370, Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, disappear in thin air on camera. And by the way, the people that are like, oh, that video's been debunked. Shut up. No, it hasn't. In fact, it's been the opposite. It's been bunked. It's not been debunked. And the man who helped really uncover the story from the beginning is Ashton Forbes, one of our favorite guests here on the show. I call him a physicist because he is. Citizen journalist, and one of the most prolific individuals in this space, and just thrilled to have you on the show. Ashton, great to have you. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Thanks, Clayton. Feelings mutual. It's always fun to talk to you.
Blast. I hope we have fun here. I'm really looking forward to this. So this is the reason I wanted to have you on, is because of this bombshell. There's a couple of stories over the past couple of weeks that kind of came out. I want to play this first soundbite from General Quast. Now he worked in Colorado, training individuals, and he saw this technology basically, I think, on the desks of Air Force engineers in the United States Air Force. And it was basically admitting that we have these incredible technologies that allows us to teleport, transport in ways that you wouldn't blow your mind. So let me just play a few seconds of this. Watch this one.
The technology is on the engineering benches today, but most Americans and most in Congress have not had time to really look deeply at what's going on here. But I've had the benefit of 33 years of studying and becoming friends with these engineers and these scientists. This technology can be built today with technology that is not developmental to deliver any human being from any place on planet Earth to any other place in less than an hour, to deliver Wi-Fi from space where you never need a cell tower to connect, to deliver.
Yeah. And then this just happened over the past 48 hours. Trump White House official of science and technology policy director Michael Kriatzos said that we possess the technology that can manipulate time and space. Watch.
Our passenger planes are slower than they used to be. Our trains crawl compared to those in other parts of the world. Our cars do not fly. Advances have not stopped, but something has gone wrong. Stagnation was a choice. We have weighed down our builders and innovators. The well-intentioned regulatory regime of the 1970s became an ever-tightening ratchet, first hampering America's ability to become a net energy exporter and then making it harder and harder to build. We seem to have lost focus and vision, to have lowered our sights and let systems and structures and bureaucracies muddle us along. But we are capable of so much more. Our technologies permit us to manipulate time and space. They leave distance annihilated, cause things to grow and improve productivity.
So he's basically, and I love what you tweeted the other day. You pointed out basically he's admitting that we allowed our technology to sort of purposefully stagnate.
Mhm.
That we almost like slowed it down on purpose, yet we have the ability to manipulate time and space. So first of all, when you heard his comments, what did you think?
Yeah, and the first thing I thought was, okay, let me see the context. And when you get the context, it's actually even crazier in the context. He's saying that we intentionally made a choice to hamstring our technology. And he's talking specifically about transportation technology. And then he says, we are capable of so much more. And when he says that we have the ability to manipulate time and space, he's talking about gravity manipulation. That's what manipulation of time and space literally is. And then after that, he kind of speaks to other things that also would speak to things like what plasma might do to make things grow, as well as just other applications for the same technology, potentially as well, like AI. He speaks to making things more productive, which in today's day and age would mean AI. He says something about the 1970s, which I don't think anybody really picked up on. But if you're somebody that has researched gravity research, in the 70s, the Mansfield Amendment was passed. And what this did was made it so that the military could not fund things that were not related to combat, direct military applications. And so gravity research got pushed to the defense contractors. So all of these references, like there's no way, if you're somebody, people gaslighting about, oh, he's talking about telephones and internet, these people are sitting at the little kids table, right? Well, there's two videos out there in perfect sync that show a plane literally disappearing out of space-time that is still missing 11 years later. So we got to just be real about it, as much as we don't want to believe it, whatever, but it seems undeniable to me.
Yeah, we're watching this. This is MH370 on the screen here, which of course disappears using. So would you say that maybe the same technologies that he's talking about is what allowed the United States government to disappear MH370?
Yeah, definitely. And what we're talking about here is technology that you can find a lot of videos of engineers talking about this. That zero-point energy technology is an echelon above anything that we have conventionally right now. So even nukes are completely obsolete in face of this level of technology. And you'll hear people talking about this all over the place. So you can imagine a lot of scenarios where with this type of technology, the United States government is uncontested in the world. And this explains why nobody has really actually tried to challenge us on the global stage for, almost an entire century at this point. And some people say, well, if these are out there, could other countries have figured it out? Yes, I think there's a shadow arms race. And I think this overlaps with the UFO community where they say that, this might be UFO tech or whatever. And then Russia and China are working on this. This is what scares me the most about this is that, if two warring factions get this level of technology, the science on display here that I want to go through with you today, it has the capability of producing not just a wormhole, but actually a black hole, like annihilation of the entire planet, maybe even the entire solar system. It's just a matter of scale. And what you realize from these videos and the science related to them is that physics, the universe is scale invariant. Stuff that you can do on the small level, small scale, you can also do on the large scale. Those orbs that you see there.
Well, yeah. Now, I had seen it popped up in my YouTube thread, the video clip they played inside my clip of the guy talking about the technology that they have now. But when I watched that yesterday, I thought to myself, Bruce, there's a podcast. But take it and make it my own and bring it into my theory, okay? Because that's a one-dimensional clip about a technology that exists, but I have the ability to place it in a larger context. Okay? Now, one of the things that I don't think I need that image slideshow anymore. Yeah. One of the things that I wondered aloud in my head, even 2 decades ago, it would have been about 2005. What allowed us to lead the world from World War II onward was, number one, the Bretton Woods Agreement, which I'll get into in a bit. And And the fact that we literally did lead the world. We were producing so much and so much new technology. We were creating the modern world. And futurism as a philosophy, which began about a century ago, I believe. I could be wrong on that. Again, don't bite my head off. But futurism is a relatively new thing. America really dove into this. And it's interesting to note also that there's only two cultures that have really gotten into science fiction. And both of those cultures were the recipients of paperclip scientists, Nazi scientists. And that's Russia and the United States, or the West, we'll say. What's interesting about science fiction is that it inverts or judo flips mythology. Mythology has always been backward looking. Taylor Sheridan is a great example of a mythologist, okay? He's the guy that did Yellowstone with Kevin Costner, about this family holding on to their ranch. And I apologize for using so many TV and movie references. I do actually watch a lot of TV and movies, but I don't consider it decadent. I consider myself a student of narrative. When you get into something, you get into something. And I'm into storytelling, and I have been since I was 19 years old. Storytelling, poetry, language. And, when you speak to, if you were to have a coffee with somebody like Martin Scorsese or Quentin Tarantino, you would be hard-pressed to name a movie they had not seen. Because they study everything that's out there, like everything. Like even like trashy Hong Kong kung fu flicks. Because for them, there could be something in there that is a little camera style or some little thing that nobody's done before, and it adds to their overall understanding of their art and their craft. And that's how I feel about narrative, which is why I constantly make movie and TV references. But Taylor Sheridan is this guy that kind of came out from nowhere. He first broke onto the scene with a minor role in Sons of Anarchy as, I think, the deputy sheriff in that town of Charming, California. And then he just turned into this powerhouse of a writer-director, okay? And he's most known for Yellowstone, which is mythology. It's backward-looking. Although the family lives in contemporary times, it's about preserving a legacy, okay? And then two spin-off series started. One was 1873, about, these families getting to Montana, and then there's another one, 1923. And it's all this like backward-looking classical mythology. And when I went to Taiwan, I noticed that as well. That all of their soap operas were set in Chinese dynasties that were anywhere from 200 to 800 years old. And I used to say to my Taiwanese friend, like, why are all your TV shows, set in these times? It seems like the most consistently employed people in the Chinese film industry, or the Taiwanese, Hong Kong film and TV industry, are the costume makers, because you got to make all these ornate costumes that represent the time of the, the Ming dynasty and various other dynasties. And they said, Bruce, that's our culture. And I thought, yeah, you know what? And then it was in the early 90s, in 93, that I first had this realization that in the West, we judo flipped our mythology. And we cast our mythology into an as of yet unmanifest future by using the power of our imagination to try to project into the future and inspire people, I suppose, to work towards that future. And it worked. I mean, it's certainly why Elon Musk is such. If there was no Star Trek with William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy as Mr. Spock, and there was no Star Wars, nobody would give a shit about Elon Musk. But he's a big hero, isn't he? Because for 75 years or 60 years, no, it's yeah, 60, 65 years. If you want to go back to the beginning of Star Trek, which I think was really the first major installment in this casting the human imagination out into space, which, by the way, I think is completely satanic. And I've said before why I think that on the Talamanca Review. Everything we're supposed to be around is here. The wind through the trees, a mountain river, hummingbirds, in my case, blue morpho butterflies, night skies absolutely dotted with stars up here in the Talamanca Mountains. The best night views I've ever seen in my life are here in the Talamanca Mountains. The way you see the sky close to the equator in the rainforest is more magnificent than the way you see the sky in northern Canada, and that's including the aurora borealis. Because we have light phenomenon up here that is just as extraordinary. We get light explosions in the sky. Nobody can really explain it to me. They've told me that it has to do with an electrical field that the volcanoes in Costa Rica create. But what happens is the whole sky will light up like a giant lightning bolt, but dispersed, not like a single bolt. But it's like lightning. The whole sky behind the clouds, it'll just light up like there was, like a nuclear bomb just went off or something. It's completely silent, and there's no follow-up thunder. I've never seen anything like it, and it's absolutely beautiful and absolutely spellbinding. Okay? Absolutely spellbinding. And I suppose I could pay a little closer attention to it, but about why it comes and when it comes, but I don't. I haven't actually, now that I think about it, I haven't seen it for a while, a few months, I think, since I've seen the sky light up. But it is what it is. So we became this forward-looking people. And we pretty much did everything. I mean, beginning with Edison and the light bulb, and Tesla, although his technology was immediately taken into the secret programs, immediately taken in. And but the world we live in now is really Western made, and specifically American made. Everything that we do, all the lights you see in India are because we invented the AC/DC electrical system and how to distribute power and how to light cities. We did that. The cars everybody drives are from Henry Ford. The televisions everybody watches are from America, although there's all kinds of other people making them now, the Chinese, the Japanese. The computer was invented in the West. Literally everything was invented in the West. And when you grew up with when I did, in the 70s and 80s, because I was born in 66, so I went through my really formative years from about 8 to 16 would have been about 1974 to about 1982. And there was a lot happening back then, and it was inconceivable that the West would fall from grace. Like once you get a head start like that, how does somebody catch up? It's, how did they catch up? Okay. And in the past, warfare was based on military training, the size of the soldiers you could produce, how young you started training them. And that's how empires were maintained. That's how city-states were defended, whether it be the Vikings, the Spartans in Greece, the samurai in Japan, the highly skilled warriors of China. So the man of war was a great figure in the past. Not so much anymore. Okay? I mean, a little bit, we pretend it, like, you can have a really decent podcast if you're like a former Navy SEAL or something like Sean Ryan, but the warrior is not what it used to be. Okay? And so we developed this technological lead, and then all of a sudden, now we've lost it. How could we possibly have lost it? How could China have caught up and in some ways surpassed us when they just started to industrialize in the late 80s under Deng Xiaoping with the special economic zones? How could they do that? Well, the answer is they couldn't. Okay? So now we're going to get into the meat of it. And I think I might go a bit longer tonight. This might be a long Talamanca review because I have a lot of stuff to get through. And if I want to take a break, because I'm recording these, I'll just hit the pause button and take a break. But here we go. Okay. So there are 3 significant developments which all gained development, all occurred or gained momentum around the same pivotal time. I've spoken to you folks about this before. And it's basically 1972. So there, when I think about the devil in us now, I should have done a 1972 chapter. But in a way I did indirectly. Okay? So you got 1947, which is a pivotal year, and we'll get into why that was later on in this podcast. By the way, this podcast is titled Blackstar. And now the Blackstar has become completely manifest, has it not? Because that gentleman said at the end of the redacted clip with Clayton Morris, they can create black holes now. They could disappear the entire world, maybe the whole solar system. Okay? And that is the black star. The black star is a mini black hole. So they have the black star cult has literally created the most destructive thing that could possibly be created, which is a black hole. Which, who knows what it does, where you go. Who knows where that plane went. Okay? But I believe what they're saying, that it was literally teleported out of the sky. I can't go too much into that. People have done a lot of podcasting on that Malaysian flight, okay? I will just say this. You want to look into who was on the plane and ask yourself why they would want to disappear those people. Okay? So, these 3 things, while not directly causing each other in a simple sequence, they're interconnected aspects of a major transition period in global economic and political history. Okay? Now, I've been over this before, but I'm going to go over it in more detail. And I'm going to add the Mansfield Amendment, which the gentleman talked about. Okay? Okay, so here's the context. So there's the breakdown of the post-war order. And this happens in the early 1970s. So just after World War II, the world was largely defined by the Bretton Woods system. And what this did was it established the US dollar as the world reserve currency and the world currency, but the US dollar, to get this concession, to get this faith from the world in these negotiations, the Bretton Woods negotiations, it had to be convertible to gold at a fixed rate. That's a very important point. It had to be convertible to gold at a fixed rate. Now, it's very hard to imagine people demanding this level of stability in a financial system when we're living in complete financial chaos. But that financial chaos we're living in now is all by design. Okay? Tonight's podcast is about how none of this stuff is random and how it all ties together. Okay? And also we had the bipolarity of the Cold War with the US and the USSR. Now, by the early 1970s, our system, the financial system in the West, in what we called euphemistically the free world, was under immense strain. And this was caused by US spending on the Vietnam War and domestic programs, which the Great Society. Okay, so this is when all of the liberal stuff started. All of the incentives for people not to work and to not fully spiritually realize themselves by standing on their own 2 feet and being independent. I did a podcast, Liberals, what are you going to do? And this is what the point I was trying to make. And it was one of the reasons they did what they did, and Nixon did what he did to inflate the money supply, was because of the strain put on the system by these social programs. Now, I don't mean to sound cold or heartless. My position on this is perfectly articulated in the podcast I did on liberalism, which focused on a very personal story to illustrate my point, and that was my brother-in-law, Stephen. But remember, I'm always talking in layers. Nothing, when I do a podcast, it's not just a straight line. It's like a short story or a novel. I'm trying to show you something bigger by explaining it in a very finite example. Okay? So the example of my brother-in-law, Stephen, and his absolutely detestable behavior, and his failure to take self-responsibility, and his continued belief that the family is going to bail him out, is putting strain on the whole family. Okay? I think the guy needs a punch in the face, but I'm a caveman. What are you going to do? Okay? And I know a lot of you who emailed me and sent me messages also thinks he needs a punch in the face, or to be completely cut off. There's no need for violence on my part. The worst thing I could do is just completely cut him off. But this isn't another Stephen podcast, so I'm going to stop myself right now. I'm just trying to refresh your memory so you can make the connection to what I'm talking about now and why we went off the gold standard. It was to support this liberal society, which is completely insane right now, with the demands of the squad, those crazy women in the Democrat Party, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer. Even Bernie Sanders makes more sense than these people now, because at least he's open about the fact that he's a Marxist. Bernie Sanders is a Marxist. He used to go to Cuba and hang out with Fidel Castro and the communists over there. Okay? These liberals, by the way, in my estimation, a society with heavy social programs run through a central bank that operates in the international banking system, the IMF, the World Bank, and the Bank of International Settlements. A country that prints money for social programs through this caveat emptor, buyer beware system with usury, with compound interest on the money the country borrows, is the worst possible outcome of the two polarities, communism and capitalism, in their purest forms. It's the worst possible outcome. And the only winner are the bankers. You see, the bankers don't give a shit who they're printing money for, because every issuance of capital has to be repaid with interest. Their business is loaning for interest. You want to build up your military? Okay, we'll loan you the money. Oh, you like social programs, do you? Okay, we'll loan you the money. And why do they keep doing that? And when we as individuals go to the bank, the scrutiny we go through to borrow money is mind-boggling, and most people get denied. But a nation can always borrow money. Have you figured out why? It's because the debtor never dies. There's always new generations being born. The debtor never dies. Okay? All of these Indians coming into Canada and these Central Americans coming into the United States, You'd have to be retarded to go to a country under the debt loads of Canada and the United States now. You're basically raising your hand and saying, I volunteer to pay this debt back. And how do they drag them into it? They give them a few years of heavy liberal incentive, which is money for free. And then once they get situated in the society and they go out, or their children go out and try and ply a trade, and they're being taxed at 55% on their income, and they can't buy homes, they're going to go, Mommy, Daddy, why did we ever leave Honduras? We had pineapples and banana plants and papaya and avocado in the backyard. We had a chicken coop. We can't even live in this country. They can live now because the government is giving them copious amounts of money. Don't get me started. It is so hard to stay on track in these podcasts. Every little yarn of thread I have to pull like an idiot. I can't help myself. I'm addicted to narrative. So the Vietnam War and the social programs led to inflation and a balance of payments deficit. Okay? Now, other countries accumulated large dollar reserves and began questioning the U.S.'s ability to back those dollars with gold. The rigid Cold War alignments were also showing signs of shifting, particularly with the Sino-Soviet split widening, and Sino is Chinese, okay? So the Nixon shock is what they called it in history. The Nixon shock, Richard Nixon, okay? In August 1971, he dismantled the monetary order without any real warning, which is why they call it a shock. What it was, President Nixon unilaterally suspended the dollar's convertibility into gold, effectively ending the Bretton Woods system of fixed exchange rates. There was no global meeting, there was no United Nations discussion about this. This was a unilateral move by the clear leader of the world, the United States of America, to its own benefit. Okay? And particularly to the benefit of the central bankers in the United States. Okay? It was really a kind of a diabolical thing. You could make the case, if you were going to be really hard-nosed, that there might not have been any other way to win the Cold War. And it's funny because when I was in software companies in the late 90s, I met a lot of Russians. And they cited, and I don't know if they were taught this in their education system in Russia, they cited the decoupling of the US dollar to gold and the expanded printing of money as the reason America won the Cold War. But they also pointed out that there would be a reckoning sometime in the future. Now, isn't it interesting that Russians coming to Canada could see that, and the average North American was blissfully unaware of it? Okay? You tell me. Okay? So why did Nixon do it? To stop the depletion of U.S. gold reserves, which I don't think are there now. When is that audit of Fort Knox supposed to be happening? As foreign nations redeem dollars, to combat U.S. inflation and to address the U.S. trade deficit by allowing the dollar to devalue. You could make the case that Trump is doing another version of what Nixon did in August 1971 right now. Okay? That he's doing another version of it, right? Now, you got to understand, this period of time is absolutely pivotal. Absolutely pivotal. There is no more pivotal year in the history of not just America, but the whole world. It goes 1947, but when I give a year, take 2 years before and 2 years after. So when I say 1947, like the 1947 chapter in The Devil in Us, you can really take that to mean from 1945 to 1949, because there's a lot of stuff packed in there. But 47 is the pivotal year. Now, I'm not going to do 1947. I wrote a whole 7,000 word chapter on it in The Devil in Us. And I think there's a few podcasts already up on it, okay? So I can't revisit that. But 1972 is another one of these years. 71, 72, okay? It's another one of these pivotal transitional periods, okay? So what was the significance and connection of this, of what Nixon did? So it was a fundamental break from the established post-war economic order. Fundamental break. Actually, you could even call it a giant fuck you to the world. Fuck you. So this thing that America does with money, and they did it again in 2007 with the mortgage, the allegedly AAA mortgage bonds, which were junk bonds when they scratched the surface. And nobody outside of America could have known that. And I find it very difficult to believe more people inside of America didn't know what was going on. In fact, I'm certain they did. And that was also a planned event as well. But that was also another fuck you by America to the world. Fuck you. What are you going to do about it? Okay? And 1971 was a fuck you. What are you going to do about it? Okay? So this ushered in an age of what we call in economics floating exchange rates and fiat currencies. And this means a money not backed by a physical commodity. So this is relatively new that we've been on a purely fiat system. Okay? It's been relatively a new system. And it demonstrates the kind of common sense intelligence that our forebearers had, our recent ancestors, our grandparents and our great-grandparents. They probably knew more about money than we know today. And why is it that we're getting so stupid? Why is it that this stuff isn't taught in school? Even when you take an economics degree now, you don't really understand economics. It's like they don't want us to know it. They want us to know it enough to be a bank teller or a bank branch manager. Okay, they train you on all the available commodities. This is how you sell a client on a 401k. This is how you do this. But they really don't want you to understand the overall system of money. I'll tell you right now, one of the best poetic descriptions and truly philosophically accurate descriptions you're ever going to get on what money actually is my novel, God is an Economist. Read it, okay? Read it, and you'll love it. It's funny. It's a great book. Now, this created enormous uncertainty, but also an elasticization, a flexibility in the international finance system that they didn't have before when they were pegged to gold and fixed exchange rates. Okay? And that was like the honor system, okay? So let's do the math here. How long did it last? So Bretton Woods begins in 1947. Is it 47? Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Another one of these key events in 1947. Forming of Israel, the Roswell, the National Security Act, the Bretton Woods Agreement. Quite a year, 1947, right? Now, it also signaled a shift where the U.S. prioritized its domestic economic needs over maintaining the existing international monetary structure it had largely created. Ergo, fuck you, world. We're the United States. What are you going to do about it? Okay? And I'm not trying to crap on the U.S. I love the U.S. I do. But they did it. Okay? They did it. And this move fundamentally altered global monetary governance. It changed it in such a fundamental way. Got to take a little break, folks. Okay, back. I suppose I can vape while I'm doing the show. I just think it's a little bit rude and a little bit, I don't know, not good for the kids to see, right? Hey, that guy, that podcast guy you like is smoking a vape. He's on a vape. Okay. Now, the other major thing that happened. So you've got Nixon taking us off the gold standard, and this is all like the early 1970s, right? Now, the next big thing is Kissinger's secret trip to China in July of 1971 and Nixon's formal visit to China, in which the media was told Nixon is going to China, which was February in 1972. And this was a major, major reshaping of the geopolitical order. And this would have been right after China had just murdered, nobody knows for sure. The number could be as high as 200 million. You never know with China. Their official figures are about 60 million, but the official figures are by the Chinese Communist Party, right? Outside observers and outside people who've done the math, or what as close to the math as they can get, say the number could be as high as 200 million Chinese died in Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution in the 60s. Horrible event, okay? And old Kissinger goes over. You know, Henry just loves being around death. I mean, Jimmy Savile was an amateur next to Kissinger, okay? So what it was a secret diplomatic mission by Henry Kissinger, followed by Nixon's public visit, okay? So Nixon went in 72 and Kissinger went in 71. And this initiated the normalization of relations between the U.S. and the People's Republic of China after decades of hostility. And why it happened? Well, a strategic geopolitical move driven by Nixon and Kissinger's realpolitik, okay? Goals included exploiting the Sino-Soviet split, okay, the Chinese-Russia split, because they didn't want that unity in the communist world. And you could say that strategically it was intelligent, okay? You could make that case very easily if you believe the linear narrative they're giving us, which I do not. There are always ulterior motives, okay? Always. And they wanted to gain leverage over the USSR, and they wanted the Chinese help in ending the Vietnam War and opening potential new economic avenues. Though that last part wasn't as immediate as the other things. So what was the significance and connection of this? So it was a monumental shift in the Cold War landscape, and it broke the strict bipolar confrontation, and it began the process of integrating China into the global political and eventually economic system. So I've always said on the Talamanca Review, China has never really been a communist country from the point that Kissinger and Nixon went in the early 70s. If they were truly a communist country, they would have unified with the Soviet Union. They would have unified with Russia, and that would have been a disaster for us. Okay? It would have been a disaster. Well, it would have been the end of the way we live and the way we think, you know. So I don't think it was a bad thing overall at all. It began the process, integrating China, and this geopolitical realignment happened concurrently with the dismantling of the Bretton Woods economic system. I heard of coincidences. I've just never seen one. Now, both actions demonstrated the U.S. adapting its strategy in response to changing global realities and its own perceived national interests. And it marked the beginning of this movement away from the rigid structures of the immediate post-war era, which was probably the last really truly fair economy we had. Okay? Now, the next point in this triumvirate of things is our friend, my friend and yours, Klaus Schwab. Now, before we get into that, I want to just play you a short clip about Henry Kissinger, because there are things about Kissinger we don't really understand, okay? Kissinger is more deeply involved in the world that is emerging now than anybody previously knew. And I'm talking about the Zionist movement, I'm talking about the UFO movement, everything, Okay? First of all, Henry Kissinger was one of the first U.S. Army intelligence officers to enter into Nazi Germany's most advanced and secretive military weapon development labs, which was built right into the mountains in Germany. I think they're the Alps. And he was in there in 1945. So Kissinger was Army intelligence in World War II. I did not know that until today when I started doing my research, okay? That's a very interesting thing to know. Now, here's something else very interesting about Kissinger.
Directly to Henry Kissinger.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Not only that, but that Kissinger was deeply involved in the flying saucer program, that Kissinger had overseen much of her late husband's work, and that he had even visited their home on occasion. Yes, Henry Kissinger, the same Kissinger that's one of the most influential and controversial figures in the 20th century.
We believe that peace is at hand.
National Security Advisor and Secretary of State under Presidents Nixon and Ford, the Harvard academic, nuclear strategist, the man who won a Nobel Peace Prize for negotiating the end of the Vietnam War, but who is also considered by many a war criminal. That Henry Kissinger. But if Maria Wang's claim was true, and Kissinger had worked with her husband before he died in 1960, that would have placed Kissinger at the center of the most secretive program in history before he had even entered public office. That is a huge claim. Is it possible that Henry Kissinger could have been overseeing the legacy
UFO division? If anybody on this planet could have told you who the men in black are, it was Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger was much more than a Secretary of State and an economist. Henry Kissinger fulfills Cliff High's idea that all of this has been run by what he calls, and what I will call, the rabbis. The entire modern intelligence network, the deep state that Trump is attempting to root out, allegedly, is all Jewish. The principal think tank in the Office of Strategic Services, which managed the intelligence for the United States and Britain in World War II, were all Jewish. So Jewish that the outlying generals and high-ranking military and staff and elected civilian officials in the Western Alliance referred to them as the rabbis. Was Kissinger one of the rabbis? He might have been too young, because in 1945, he would have been quite young. I mean, he died, well, not that young. He died just a year or so ago. About a year, 2 years at the most, around the same time as my father. And Kissinger was 100 years old, which means he would have been born at about 1922. So in 1945, he would have been 23 years old. Probably too young to be one of the rabbis, but he was probably mentored by them. Now, the rabbis went on to form the CIA, MI6, and Israel. So this is the triumvirate, right? And it's interesting that they all have the word united in their names. The original name of Israel was the United Kingdom of Israel. You have the United Kingdom of Great Britain. You have the United States of America. To the best of my knowledge, there are no other countries in the world with the word united in them. UAE, United Arab Emirates, it might? Yeah, okay. There could be more, but you get my point, right? And the countries most invested in Israel, making sure that it gets its needs met and it gets its temple built outside of the diaspora Jews and the Israelis themselves, are Britain, the United Kingdom of Britain, and the United States of America. And when you look at the expansion of Israel and what's been going on since the October 7th war, you can see right in front of your eyes the United Kingdom of Israel reforming. Okay? Now I ask you, why is the rebuilding of the religious empire of an ancient desert people and their magical temple concurrent with black hole technology, time travel, and UFOs? Why? Well, let's just keep going and let's see if some of these questions can be answered. So, the third thing is Klaus Schwab and the founding of the World Economic Forum. And this took place in January 1971. Now, Klaus Schwab was a German business professor. He founded what at that time he called the European Management Forum, renamed the World Economic Forum, or the WEF, in 1987 in Davos, Switzerland. Now, Kissinger also had a role in developing or implementing what is now the WEF, the World Economic Forum, and he appointed Klaus Schwab in 1971. So he's a pretty busy boy, this Henry Kissinger, who was directly tied to all the UFO research, Roswell, and everything. Okay? Now, I didn't capture this in The Devil in Us. You could look on tonight's podcast as a footnote or an addendum to my book, The Devil in Us. I mean, it's just any one of those middle chapters, any one of the chapters in the book that are not based on my life, telling my story, and 4 generations of my family. So basically, the center of the book, all those chapters, the 6 chapters in the center, any one of them could have been their own book. The Devil, 1947, The Human Devil, Blood, Event Horizon. Any one of them could have been their own 80,000-word book. But I didn't want to write information. I wanted to tell a story. I wanted to tie things together that people don't normally tie together, which is what I'm trying to do tonight, which is what I discovered this morning. I had this epiphany, this realization when I saw that redacted segment on time travel. And I went, oh my God. And then I started to dig into it. And then later on in the day, through digging into it and through calculated searches on Google and YouTube and DeepSeek and Gemini AIs, I came to all this information about Henry Kissinger as well, that he is now being tied to the UFO movement. Okay? I don't want to get ahead of myself, but, you know, folks, I don't think we're going to be invaded by extraterrestrials. I think we already have been invaded by extraterrestrials. And the massaging of the world to get us to a certain point has been the formal process of the public declaration. But the extraterrestrial takeover probably happened sometime around World War II and is probably related to the weapons we used on Japan and the weapons testing we continued to do right up until the 50s, until there was a global ban on nuclear weapons testing. So, why was the WEF formed? Now, Schwab's initial goal was to introduce European business leaders to American management practice and promote his concept of stakeholder capitalism. The idea that businesses should serve the interests of all stakeholders, employees, customers, and society, not just shareholders. What a fucking load of shit that is. It's like almost the exact opposite has happened. Okay? And it makes him sound so human, doesn't it? Oh, Klausy, he's just here to help the world. What a fucking load of shit. Okay? Stakeholder capitalism. What's the significance and connection? Well, the WEF emerged precisely during this period of global flux and uncertainty. While not a direct cause or effect of the other two events, its founding reflects the environment created by these shifts. By the way, that's DeepSeek speaking. I put my theory into DeepSeek and I asked, what are the connection between these things? And it spat out this essay. So most of it gets all the facts right, but some of the conclusions I don't agree with. So as I'm going through it, I'll let you know. I don't agree with that. I think it's all intentional. I don't think there's anything accidental about this. Okay? So there was a need, they say, for a new dialogue. The breakdown of old economic Bretton Woods and geopolitical rigid bipolarity systems created a need for new platforms where global leaders, initially business, later political and academic, could discuss the changing world order and emerging challenges. And I'm sure that a lot of people who go to the WEF, like Chrystia Freeland and these people, I'm sure they believe the bullshit. I don't think these people, there's a lot of people involved in this agenda that are just unconscious actors. Okay? As Anton Chigurh says, they're just putting it up, and they've been putting it up their whole lives. And though somebody like that would be absolute putty in the hands of a master manipulator and pure psychopath like Henry Kissinger. Easily. And Klaus Schwab, okay? So, and it also marks the rise of globalization. Both the move to floating currencies, right, taking us off the gold exchange, fixed gold exchange rate, fixed rate, and fixed rate currencies were much more balanced. I mean, just look at the world we live in now. When I moved to Costa Rica 10 years ago, $1 Canadian was worth about 500. The highest it's ever been is 550 colones. It's now worth about 340 colones. So in one decade, my spending power has decreased by about 35-40% because of the machinations of this floating currency index that I think is just a looting system for the hedge fund managers. Okay? But that's the world we live in now. And stakeholder capitalism has done nothing to make it a better world. Okay? And I don't see how stakeholder capitalism could be the current motto of the WEF when you get Dr. Evil there, Klaus Schwab, saying things like, you'll own nothing and never be happier. Okay? People have to have a sense of ownership. When a badger digs a den, it owns it. You put your hand in there, you're going to get your hand bitten off. This is a law of nature. Okay? And human beings are no different. We need to have a place in the world where we can say, this is ours, and nobody can violate me in this space unless they have a warrant to come on my property and arrest me, in which case I've probably committed a serious criminal offense and I deserve to be arrested. Okay? So this also marks the beginning of the rise of globalization and the floating currencies, which eventually facilitated much swifter and easier moving capital flows, and the opening to China, which laid the groundwork for China's integration into the global economy, were precursors to the modern globalization. Ergo, the whole thing was planned. Globalization has always been the plan. New World Order, it's right on the US dollar, okay? Now, the WEF positions itself as a forum to discuss and shape this nascent globalization. Okay? So let's try to connect some of these threads. The connection isn't a simple causal chain, A caused B, B caused C. Rather, these three events are intertwined facets of a pivotal moment in history, 1971. But that pivotal moment was created. Okay? The Nixon shock signaled the end of the post-war economic order. And I see people talking in the last 10 years about the old Bretton Woods order collapsing. It collapsed in 1971, you fucking idiots. I see people on financial news shows saying this. That's how outrageous the level of ignorance in the world is now. People just, they show up and they spew shit and they don't even know what they're talking about. And you'd be amazed how often this goes on now. And in some instances, it goes right up to the highest office, public office in a country. Justin Trudeau is a classic example. He's literally a fucking moron, okay? He's not a smart guy at all. And here he is running a country and going along for 9 years with catchphrases and slogans and denigrating anybody who gets in his way. And all the while saying, we're going to put an end to bullying. And he's actually the biggest bully out there. The hypocrisy is mind-boggling. Now, the opening to China signaled a major shift in the post-war geopolitical order. And the founding of the WEF represented the emergence of a new type of non-governmental forum aimed at convening global elites to navigate and shape the new, more uncertain and increasingly globalized world that these economic and geopolitical shifts were creating. Okay? Now that's only one of the things I have to discuss. Now, the other thing is just going to tie it all together. I got to take another quick break. That was a lovely break, and I had some nice vaping, which I'm going to continue to do. Now, this next part of the podcast is where I'm going to show you that this was all done intentionally. And the world we're living in now is the result of the seeds planted in the early 70s. It's like putting a little acorn in the ground and you come back in 55 years and it's an oak tree. It's a big oak tree. And everybody goes around and pretends that this is some kind of natural social evolution. And this is the product of governmental administrations that come and go every 4 years. Okay? And we have this Donald Trump character allegedly saying he's going to dismantle it. Maybe he is. I haven't lost complete faith yet, but there's talk of another major mRNA rollout to deal with the bird flu. So that's 2 times that Trump has done this, and he cannot be ignorant of the consequences of the first round of vaccines. There's no way. And RFK Jr. is involved in this. Okay? Now, here's where it gets super freaky. And I put this all together today in a fit of inspiration and revelation, okay? It was like it was given to me. Now, to understand everything, you have to understand what that gentleman talked about in the video, okay? You know what? I don't mean to like bore you or anything, but maybe we should watch that again because it's really important. So let's watch it one more time. The 6-minute clip from Clayton Morris, okay?
All right, I want to talk about time travel. I'm looking forward to this all day. I've been looking forward to talking with Ashton Forbes all day in the secret technology. Yes, the White House admitting this week, on the record, by the way, that we possess the technology to manipulate time and space. In other words, time travel, teleportation technology, like the very same technology that was used to make MH370, Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, disappear in thin air on camera. And by the way, the people that are like, oh, that video's been debunked. Shut up. No, it hasn't. In fact, it's been the opposite. It's been bunked. It's not been debunked. And the man who helped really uncover the story from the beginning is Ashton Forbes, one of our favorite guests here on the show. I call him a physicist because he is. Citizen journalist and one of the most prolific individuals in this space, and just thrilled to have you on the show. Ashton, great to have you. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Thanks, Clayton. Feelings mutual. It's always fun to talk to you.
Blast. I hope we have fun here. I'm really looking forward to this. So this is the reason I wanted to have you on is because of this bombshell. There's a couple of stories over the past couple of weeks that kind of came out. I want to play this first soundbite from General Quast. Now he worked in Colorado, training individuals, and he saw this technology basically, I think, on the desks of Air Force engineers in the United States Air Force. And it was basically admitting that we have these incredible technologies that allows us to teleport, transport in ways that you wouldn't blow your mind. So let me just play a few seconds of this. Watch this one.
The technology is on the engineering benches today, but most Americans and most in Congress have not had time to really look deeply at what's going on here. But I've had the benefit of 33 years of studying and becoming friends with these engineers and these scientists. This technology can be built today with technology that is not developmental to deliver any human being from any place on planet Earth to any other place in less than an hour, to deliver Wi-Fi from space where you never need a cell tower to connect, to deliver.
Yeah. And then this just happened over the past 48 hours. Trump White House official of science and technology policy director Michael Kriatzos said that we possess the technology that can manipulate time and space. Watch.
Our passenger planes are slower than they used to be. Our trains crawl compared to those in other parts of the world. Our cars do not fly. Advances have not stopped, but something has gone wrong. Stagnation was a choice. We have weighed down our builders and innovators. The well-intentioned regulatory regime of the 1970s became an ever-tightening ratchet, first hampering America's ability to become a net energy exporter and then making it harder and harder to build. We seem to have lost focus and vision, to have lowered our sights and let systems and structures and bureaucracies muddle us along. But we are capable of so much more. Our technologies permit us to manipulate time and space. They leave distance annihilated, cause things to grow, and improve productivity.
So he's basically, and I love what you tweeted the other day. You pointed out basically he's admitting that we allowed our technology to sort of purposefully stagnate, that we almost like slowed it down on purpose, yet we have the ability to manipulate time and space. So first of all, when you heard his comments, what did you think?
Yeah, and the first thing I thought was, okay, let me see the context. And when you get the context, it's actually even crazier in the context. He's saying that we intentionally made a choice to hamstring our technology. And he's talking specifically about transportation technology. And then he says, we are capable of so much more. And when he says that we have the ability to manipulate time and space, he's talking about gravity manipulation. That's what manipulation of time and space literally is. And then after that, he kind of speaks to other things that also would speak to things like what plasma might do to make things grow, as well as just, other applications for the same technology, potentially as well, like AI. He speaks to making things more productive, which in today's day and age would mean AI. He says something about the 1970s, which I don't think anybody really picked up on. But if you're somebody that has researched gravity research, in the 70s, the Mansfield Amendment was passed. And what this did was made it so that the military could not fund things that were not related to combat, direct military applications. And so gravity research got pushed to the defense contractors. So all of these references, like there's no way, if you're somebody, people gaslighting about, oh, he's talking about telephones and internet. These people are sitting at the little kids table, right? Well, there's two videos out there in perfect sync that show a plane literally disappearing out of space-time that is still missing 11 years later. So we got to just be real about it, as much as we don't want to believe it, whatever, but, it seems like...
Okay, that's all we need right now. Now, we deliberately stagnated our technology, and the Mansfield Act stipulated that the Department of Defense could only work on things that were directly applicable to warfare. And so the consequence of this was that all of this other technology got shipped to private defense contractors. So the Mansfield Act was basically about taking this technology, which Richard Nixon was fully conscious of, the same Richard Nixon who probably counseled to take us off the gold standard, the same Richard Nixon who went to China, and the same Richard Nixon who appointed the WEF. And what's happening now? Well, it's a mass culling of the human race. All of this has been paid for largely by the American taxpayer. You own the technology that Bechtel has, that Lockheed Martin has, that Booz Hamilton has. You own it because it was developed largely with U.S. taxpayer money in the form of grants. Okay? And it was put into the private sector because they knew in the early 70s that the future society would be a kind of techno-feudal fascism run by not nation states, but private corporations. This has all been planned, folks. Let's get into the Mansfield Act now, and I'm going to read to you what DeepSeek gave me when I put in a very well-worded question. The Mansfield Amendment, formerly Section 203 of the fiscal year 1970 Military Procurement Authorization Act, thought, though often associated with its reinforcement or effects felt into 1973, had a significant impact on both the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, which is where all the mind control is coming out of, all of the blue light technology that Dr. Jack Kruse talks about is coming out of DARPA. Okay? So these are not, what I'm saying is these are not our friends. They're not creating a brave new world for us all to live in like the Jetsons floating around in flying cars. We don't count. They would prefer it if we just died. And I don't mean to be so harsh in this podcast, but you need to get this. You need to understand this. Okay? And broader Department of Defense research procurement. Now, the core requirement of the Mansfield Act. The amendment stipulated that Department of Defense funds could only be used for research or studies that had a direct and apparent relationship to a specific military function or operation. This was a response in part to Vietnam War era concerns and campus protests about the military funding potentially non-military related basic research at universities. I don't know. Now, the effects on DARPA, which was then known as ARPA, not DARPA. A shift from basic to applied research. Before the amendment, ARPA funded a significant amount of diverse, basic, and sometimes unrestricted or blue sky research. The amendment forced a major shift requiring ARPA/DARPA to prioritize projects with clear, demonstrable potential for military applications, fighter jets, missiles, things like this. Focus on military relevance. Researchers seeking funding had to explicitly justify how their work related to a specific military need. This sometimes led researchers to frame their projects like artificial intelligence and robotics in terms of potential future military uses. Renaming. The agency was renamed from ARPA to DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, in 1972. There's that pivotal year again, 1972. Formally emphasizing its connection to the defense mission. Transfer, loss of programs and personnel. Some purely basic research programs were transferred out of DARPA and the DoD, potentially moving to agencies like the National Science Foundation, although NSF didn't always receive corresponding budget increases to support them fully. This also led to a brain drain, where some prominent scientists involved in basic research left DARPA-funded projects. Some moved to institutions like Xerox and Park, contributing significantly to innovations in personal computing. Narrowed scope. It curtailed DARPA's ability to fund research simply because it was scientifically interesting or potentially transformative in a general sense, demanding a more direct link to defense capabilities. This initially limited DARPA's focus on dual-use military and civilian technologies, though funding for such technologies saw a resurgence in later decades. Now, the effects on defense procurement. Stricter justification for research funding. The amendment imposed a stricter requirement across the DoD for justifying basic research expenditures. An entity receiving Department of Defense funds for basic research had to articulate its relevance to a military mission. Narrowing of DoD basic research. It effectively narrowed the scope of basic scientific research that the DoD could legally fund, pushing more fundamental science support towards civilian agencies like the NSF. And as the gentleman said in the redacted clip, to private companies. Okay? You're basically the deep state, the people that Donald Trump is allegedly cleaning up. Okay? This same deep state, which liaises with the men in black, who police public discussion about what they're seeing, what's happening in their communities, specifically UFO related. Okay? Now, I believe at this point that all of that was done because the alien takeover has always been here, and that the aliens that are coming in now are actually trying to help humanity, and that's why they don't want us talking about this. I could be wrong. It's pure speculation, but think about it yourself. Impact on university research. Universities receiving DoD research funds faced increased scrutiny and the need to demonstrate the military relevance of their work, influencing the types of projects undertaken with defense funding. Unintended consequence. While intended to focus defense spending, some argue it curtailed valuable basic research in certain fields, like cybernetics, within the DoD ecosystem. Conversely, it may have inadvertently boosted funding for fields like AI and robotics, where military applications could be more readily envisioned and articulated. Social science research relevant to defense was also significantly cut back, a trend only reversed decades later with initiatives like Minerva. In summary, the Mansfeld Amendment fundamentally reshaped DARPA's research portfolio, pushing it towards more mission-oriented R&D, and imposed stricter military relevance criteria on all DoD-funded basic research procurement, significantly altering the landscape of government-funded science in the United States. Wrong. All due respect, DeepSeek, or I think Gemini was the AI I used for that question. What this did was take this technology, which Kissinger was well aware of, and the deep state was forming back then. It probably formed around 1947. And it was a combination of cutting-edge minds, the brightest people that would be scouted and recruited while they're in their undergraduate studies, and these would be the geniuses that go to university when they're 14 or 15, or the people who can get a PhD, go from first-year university to a PhD in 2 or 3 years. They would all be sucked into these programs. Also, there would be a complete occulting of what's going on by taking it out of the DoD. So a private company has intellectual property rights. The Department of Defense does not. It has certain security measures, but it is subject to all kinds of oversight and congressional review. Bechtel is not. Booz Hamilton is not. Lockheed Martin Skunk Works is not. And all the other companies that go into this deep network of trillion-dollar companies that are part of this Blackstar culture. Okay? And where's it all leading? Tie it all together. taking us off the gold standard, opening up China for basic manufacturing, and the commencement of the WEF. You're looking at the blueprint of the New World Order. Now, there are extremely rational reasons why they may not have made all of this public. Okay? Things like disturbing the status quo of a society, religious values, cultural values, shocking people. I mean, all of this is understandable. What tips the scale in the cynic's favor is the blatant depopulation agenda that started around 2020. So all of our fathers and grandfathers who contributed their tax money to this dark research, and it's been going on in all the Five Eyes countries. It's not just the United States. You've got Pine Gap in Australia. You've got all kinds of these Blackstar scientists in retirement homes in Canada. You've got them in the UK. MI6 was involved. So it's not just the United States. But all of our, and this goes hand in hand with the exploration of the individual human consciousness and its weaponization through the mind control, through the MK Ultra program, through the black occult practice of pairing these super soldiers with demons. This actually, I know, it sounds like a comic book, but it actually went on. Okay? It actually went on. And it's all brought us to this point. And while I'll be the first to admit that it looks a little bit hopeless right now, don't give up. Okay? I don't believe for a moment that this technology is the product of human ingenuity. I think it was given to us by negative extraterrestrial races that the secret societies communicated with. Okay? And extra dimensionals, which are something else. An extraterrestrial is something that originated on a planet in 3D form and was born to a society that can move through time and space in the way it appears we can already do as human beings. Okay? So this puts Sean David Morton's Sands of Time into much better perspective. And that guy was something of a hero. And they killed him for writing those books. Do not kid yourself. Sean David Morton was taken out. He is a 21st century martyr. Okay? I don't want to hear anybody talking shit about that guy. He had a huge ego and, you know, ladies' man, no doubt, but he stepped up, man. He did the right thing for all of us in writing those books and telling us what he knew. Okay? Now, why I don't think this... Oh, and the final thing is, why are the Jews in the Temple of Solomon so tied to this? Why is an ancient religion that practices blood ritual so integral to this? Well, the blood ritual is reptilian. Okay? Blood ritual and black magic is always reptilian. And there is a certain portion of the Jewish world that is probably fully reptilian now. They look human, but they're not human anymore. They've interacted with, integrated with, and shared their consciousness to such a degree with reptilian energy that they can't get back. Okay? And that's why the temple's important. Because we're moving into a reptilian world. Not a human world, a reptilian world. And the extraterrestrials we're seeing now, as Cliff High so adroitly points out, are here probably to help us. Because the things that have been done on this planet break cosmic law. And that's the only thing we have going in our defense, is that something else can come in and help us. And there's no shame in that. We have been overwhelmed by an intellectual, cultural, and technological invasion from another race of beings. And they don't like us. They want to kill us. These negative beings, they want this planet. Listen carefully to what these crazy fucking rabbis in Israel are saying. Amalek has to die. Edom has to be decimated. Their women have to be raped. They sound fucking Jimmy Savile psychotic. Okay? And these are rabbis. These are religious leaders counseling people and leading people in worship in a synagogue. Listen to these Chabad motherfuckers. So, in context of today's podcast, I want you to ask yourself something. What is the Messiah from the Jewish perspective? Do you think it's anything that's good for us, the Gentile? I don't. Okay? I don't think so at all. This is the culmination of the Blackstar subculture, what Donald Trump calls the deep state. I call it the Blackstar cult. And they're on the cusp of taking over this world, unless a higher force comes in and helps us. And for that to happen, we have to be good. We have to be worth saving. We can't be a species that they look down upon and say, they're not worth saving. Okay? And I believe, through the literature I've read and the information I've come across, that a lot of what we would call the neutral ET races have sort of taken that attitude. They've looked at us, they've looked at our culture, and they've said, why should we do anything to help them? They're a race bent on destroying themselves. So if you want to contribute this to this in any way, just be good, be better, be something worth saving. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.